Hey, all you Ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. As we get started here, drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat. There's a lot going on LinkedIn now, so drop that URL in the chat and expand your network with at least one person today. Your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. So AI agents are here. They're not coming. They're here. So they're writing emails. They're doing things throughout our organization, and that's kind of time for a little bit of panic. But panic without any kind of governance framework is really just empty anxiety. So we're going to turn that panic into something that's going to be useful for you. We have a panel of experts here, and we're going to explore what AI agents actually are, how they're different than regular AI chatbots and tools that we've maybe been using, and where this thing is going, and then ultimately how we can build a governance framework that is going to help us wrap our arms around this new technological risk that's ripping through our organization. So I'm going to rip through a couple of quick announcements here. We have a great, of course, we're giving away credits, so that's old news. But this is the place to be for credit. So you don't have to let your designations lapse. If budget is not there for you to go to these conferences, you can just come to the Ethicsverse every week. You can even put it on mute. Don't tell anybody. Just kidding. We're also going to be giving away this phenomenal book, Influence is Your Superpower, by my good friend Zoe Chance. If you have not checked this book out, I really encourage you to do it. I just wrote an article about the importance of having sort of diverse perspectives and feeding that into your compliance work. That's going to give you some new ideas. And one of the most important diverse perspectives to have is the perspective of influence. So stay active in the chat today. Ask some really good questions. This is a topic that's top of mind for everybody. And win yourself a book, or just go on over to Amazon and pick that up yourself. This benchmark report is crowning, okay? It's coming out in the next couple of days here. So next week, we're going to have a whole session diving through the benchmark report. We're going to talk about all the cool findings from the last year. There's a ton of great information in this. So if you have not signed up to get the 2026 benchmark report, this is your signal. Also wanted to signal, first of all, I want to apologize for those of you who tried to sign up for the beta. I saw that I had an incorrect setting on the form. So that has now been fixed, but want to introduce this to everybody here. And this is kind of apropos for the topic at hand, but Ethico is building and launching the first AI native third-party risk management platform. You know how third-party risk is a massive risk in your organization. You know how it's kind of a pain. You know how the sales team comes and says, hey, I need to engage this third party. Can you click through this and get this done? And you're like, hold the brakes. There's a lot of stuff we have to check out here. Well, we have a solution here that really leverages AI and lets you spend more of your time on the actual risks. You can build your risk management algorithms directly into the program, gives you a full audit trail. It's super configurable to your specific business and really lets you spend more of your time on the things that matter and cuts out all that time that makes you look like somebody who's holding up the business. So if you're interested in being part of this beta, there is a QR code coming up here for you to sign up for it. Well, we have a couple of screenshots, and probably next week we're going to be doing a one-off session, probably in the middle of the week, for those of you who are interested, who just kind of want to see how the platform works and looks, and see if you want to get involved in this early stage before we fully launch it. Then you're welcome to come to that. But here's the QR code for that. We'll drop a link in the chat as well, and sign up. Of course, it's cool. Also, what's cool is our smart disclosures platform. So there are so many different use cases for this disclosures platform that feeds directly into your case management system. You can apply workflow rules, automatic routing for these kinds of things, and you can create many different types of forms. So we have a client who is leveraging this for anti-retaliation right now. This is a massive problem in every single organization. There, I said it. But having an evergreen location that can be an evergreen link that can be sent to reporters for them to report on if there's any retaliation after that case is closed 30, 60, 90 days later. So it's on you to take advantage of all these tools that are available in the marketplace and configure them to drive the impact forward for your program, to reduce that risk and really lay that groundwork for the culture of integrity that can lead to the better business results that you can start to take credit for. If you have not signed up yet for the one and only Matt Kelly's Radical Compliance newsletter, if you don't have this pinned to your browser tab, you're not serious about compliance, okay? So create a new tab, hop on over to Radical Compliance right now. He just ripped out a phenomenal article about some of the changes going on for internal audit. Every article he puts out, I'm not just saying this because he's here, I'd say it if he wasn't here. Every article he puts out, I always find something in there. He has such a unique voice, and he's always right at the cutting edge of the things that we care about. So if you have not signed up for the newsletter, absolutely do that and check that out. With that, I'm going to pass this over to the coolest guy in compliance, Matt Kelly, the best moderator in the game, to dive into this phenomenal topic. How's it going, Matt?
It's going very well, Nick, and thank you for the kind words and the plug for the newsletter. I appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who is joining us today. And as Nick said, we are here to talk about agent AIs, or AI agents, I suppose, and what they can do for you, what you might be doing with AI agents right now. However, AI agents, at least at this early point, still do carry a lot of risk. So how are compliance officers supposed to think about AI agents? How could you use them in your compliance team? How could you govern everybody else in your organization who also is thinking agents are great? What could go wrong? I'm going to use them. A lot could go wrong. And we don't really necessarily know how to build the right governance oversight structures for agents yet. That is what we're going to talk about. So we have 3 guests in addition to Nick and I today who are going to help us talk through that. First is Andrew Heineman, who is Chief Compliance Officer at Honest Health in Nashville. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be part of the discussion today.
And then second, joining us from Ontario is Shruti Mukherjee, and Shruti is head of GRC at Global Vision, which is a healthcare firm up in Ontario. Shruti, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you, Matt. The pleasure is all mine. Happy to be here.
And then third is Scott Intner, who is a former Chief Compliance Officer and now a healthcare compliance consultant who has done an awful lot of work on these issues as well. So Scott, thanks for being here too.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
And as always, listeners, if you have questions, if you have comments, you can put them into the attendee chat. In theory, we save the last 10 minutes or so of the hour for questions, but we want to make this as productive for everybody listening as possible. If you ask a really good question right away, I'll probably try and sneak it into our panelists as quick as I can. So the more you give us feedback, the more we can try and make sure this hour it gives you the most bang for your buck. All of that said, I'm just going to start with the very simple question of what is your take on AI agents? Like, how beneficial could they be? How risky could they be? Andrew, I'll start with you, and then Scott, and then Shruti, and then finally Nick. But in 60 seconds or less, what are we supposed to think about these things right now?
I mean, yeah, they can be scary, but you can't stick your head in the sand, right? Just like any new technology that comes into the operational space, you've got to lean in and educate yourself, get your hands dirty. And then 2, as a compliance officer, I'm grateful and appreciative that, I don't have to fight too hard for resources, but you have to be conscientious of resources. So I see AI as really a force multiplier. It can expand the capabilities of my team beyond the current headcount and the current tools. So we're definitely leaning in. 1, so that I know what risks to look out for on the operational side, and then 2, to make sure, as a compliance function, we're being effective and efficient and using the resources we can get access to.
All right. Shruti, what would you say about AI agents right now? What are we supposed to think about them?
So the way I think about it is we had AI, who I think of it more like an intern who were performing some activities for us, like drafting something. And now we have AI agents who are not just drafting, they're actually logging into your email and sending that email directly to your users. So AI has gone from advisor more towards being an actor. I am personally a big fan. I think we needed compliance team, especially for my own. We definitely have resource shortages. We are not given a lot of equipments and things to deal with things. So something like this would tremendously help me to superpower the resource that I have and actually have better use of it, because then I already have additional helping hand. But of course, as you said, there's risk. There's many, many different risks that I can talk about, but we have the whole hour. But the biggest one is like when AI agents are making decisions, a black box theory comes to mind. it is going to take decision on your behalf. It will have all the powers to take the decision because you will be giving it to them. But if something goes wrong, what exactly is going to happen? And it can make mistakes. It is still an intern, and how exactly we're going to navigate. So I think that's the biggest risk that comes to my mind.
Okay. Scott, you're the consultant. That means you are very good at pointing out some of the risks that people should anticipate here. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on AI agents and like what could go wrong. What should we be trying to be aware of as we build guardrails?
Yeah.
All the opportunities too that Shruti and Andrew mentioned, but what would you say?
I love the fact that Shruti started with describing AI as an intern, because my favorite, or at least the most amusing description of AI I ever heard, was it's a tireless drunk intern that sometimes lies. They've come a little way since then. But basically what we're doing is we're taking that intern and putting them in charge of a whole pool of interns to create this network that lets them take decisions on our behalf. And it's that grant of authority to take action without checking for approval at each step that both significantly increases its ability, what it can do, the efficiencies, but also the risks. And when used correctly, with intentionality, with risk awareness and appropriate controls and safeguards, it can be incredibly beneficial. And without that deliberate step, it's quite risky. As an aside, I do have, I would be remiss not to point out that one of the concerns I have with the label of agentic agent, and the same reasons I have concerns about hallucinations is, as humans, we like we like making things appear to be humans, as I fumble over my words today. And calling them agents gives them this aura of being sentient, of being actual beings. And that leaves a risk that we're still ultimately responsible for what they do. I know as we're going to go through today, I'm sure we're going to talk about what the different controls are and other things like that in specific. But it's really important to keep in mind that we're compliance professionals. We're all about the risk and identifying it and mitigating it and controlling it.
All right. And then, Nick, I don't know if you have any other thoughts here right now, but I still am just struck that, the through line here is if everything is planned, if all the guardrails work, the agents are awesome. I don't know anybody who has planned everything out successfully and built all of the guardrails successfully so that it will be awesome. And we just have this uncertainty principle that we're trying to fumble along with right now. But what are your thoughts when you're talking with compliance officers out there, Nick?
Well, I think we're at this time where it's like, we need lights, but electricity is like dangerous. You know what I'm saying? So the answer is not candles. We need to, as we said earlier, it's not time to kind of bury our heads in the sand. But I think we need to understand like what these things are. And to Scott's point, understand what the risks of them are, because they're being used throughout the organization by people that have a different sort of set of criteria for what they're trying to solve for. There's different incentive structures in different departments in your organization. And you as compliance have to sort of help manage those risks and help see around the curve. So, I think broadly, there's like a ton of upside with these, but the downside is really being underappreciated. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out recently, over the last couple of days even, where, they had this outage at AWS, a 13-hour outage due to AI agentic coding. And the AI, wanted to, fix the problem, and it thought the best way to do it was to delete something and rebuild it. That caused a lot of outage that, that's some of the downside that I'm talking about. You touched on something else, though, Matt, that I don't think a lot of us are really like dialed in on, and that is this hallucination risk, right? We've all heard about this hallucination risk, and the hallucination risk, it's never going to be kind of deleted from this because it's mathematically built into these LLM models. So we have to really be conscious. Like these are highly obedient, things. Okay, I'm not going to call it a person because I don't want to, upset Scott here. But like, they're highly obedient and they're going to do exactly what they're told to do. And when you couple that with, that sort of functionality with the inherent hallucination that's mathematically built into, how these LLMs are built, we're kind of entering this high blast radius kind of scenario that we need to really understand. So, like they say, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Every kind of benefit that comes from technology has an equal and opposite kind of like downside. And broadly across our economy, people are not really focused on the downside, which means that we have to be able to focus on the downside to make sure that we can be that counterbalance and avoid this blast radius I'm talking about, which takes us understanding how these things work, what the capabilities are, and how these might be deployed, which we'll talk about some more today. So
I am glad you brought up the Amazon Web outage thanks to an agent, because actually later on, I want to talk about some of the ways we're going to have to rethink our roles and permissions and whatnot that I don't know that a human senior engineer ever would have thought to do what the agent did. And then I also like the idea that we need to remember what was a hallucination for generative AI, where it just made up a fact in a report that you might read. A hallucination in a process is going to be different. And that's the thing that could send your whole organization tripping over its own feet, which is kind of sort of what happened with Amazon.
Yeah, the agent hallucinates and then acts on it because it has that sort of autonomous power, which is crazy. Yes. And there's one other thing, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but like the confidence with which models respond is trained into them, right? Like they give responses and they get this sort of binary feedback on whether it's a good response or a bad response. And they get bad responses for anything that's wrong or anything that's not as confident. So there's this confidence coupled with the hallucination now multiplied by this new sort of dimension of, autonomous, agency. It's just accelerating a lot faster than we think,
So I'm going to put a question out to the listeners for now. If you want to pop your answers into the attendee chat. Number one, are you, listeners, actually using AI agents right now in your compliance team today? And if you are, if you want to talk about exactly how you're using the agents, but I am curious how, for real, use of AI agents is right now in corporate organizations, in your compliance program at your organization, or in your company generally. Andrew and then Shruti, let me ask you the question as well. Like, what are you doing with AI agents right now? Just give us some examples of some of the cool stuff or the experiments or whatever. But Andrew first and then Shruti, like, what are you doing with AI right now? And what are the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, so a couple of examples that I'd throw out there are people and culture team where, human resources, we partner with them in building our compliance and ethics trainings. And through them, we've been able to access, AI video creation tools that are interesting, but it works for our company as a small company. We have certain populations across the country that, there's limited risk, I would say, and we don't need to care for, different languages. We don't have to care too much for different risks that come in those trainings and accents, but those are things that you need to look out for if you are engaging with a partner or a vendor that uses an AI technology, and you do need to have multiple languages or care for regionality. Another example that really, again, getting my hands dirty, and I should also clarify, I appreciate all the comments around the risk, and that's something we're going to get more into. But my company has a platform, AI platform we've approved, and so once we did that, I jumped in, and it's Copilot, and tried to figure out how can I use this to help our compliance audits. And so, one resource I was able to figure out was, instead of doing an audit sample that, a significantly meaningful sample size or population, through the use of the agent, I was able to audit all 5,000 plus providers instead of just a sample size. And then the outcome of that, there's a lot of testing, a lot of work with my operational partners to say, does this sound accurate? Some quality testing on the outputs. So it was a learning experience, but then to be able to create a repeatable process that is an automated control and then implement that into their processes as an outcome. The scope of that audit alone expanded, exponentially because we went to the whole population instead of just a sample size. So that was a test case for me, and why I really see that as that force multiplier. That said, we've talked about the black box, or, Nick, you said a second ago, these things do exactly what you tell them. The problem is you don't know what's in that black box and what else is being told to the agent. And so that's where the testing and the monitoring and ensuring, it's doing what you say, but not just trying to make you happy, but actually doing the testing for an audit perspective is really important. So it's a one instance and something that my team's been able to use and learn from, and we continue to implement. But just another example here to share with the group.
All right.
That's cool.
Shruti, what about what you're trying to do, or what sort of immediate use cases you think compliance teams could embrace?
So first of all, my company, we fall under the highly regulated environment. So any adoption of any AI agents or anything related to AI just go through a lot of guardrails and making sure everything is in place. So adoption is not very quick. But personally, for the team, I've been using AI agents specifically for the use case as a policy tracker. So we are a small team, and there is a lot of regulatory changes that is shaping up, especially with AI. And there are different countries that my company operates to. So we need to keep track of all of those things. In the past, it used to be either handing it out to a third party or just doing it differently. Today, I use a bot who monitors it for me and updates me based on the changes. Sometimes we also use it to get myself updated on what's happening on radical compliance, and it lets me know the new articles that you have posted, stuff like that. So largely to gather information and kind of what exactly is changing out there and keep our team and myself up to date. That's like the live example. The next stages we are thinking is also to adopt it more towards the TPRM pieces. So third-party risk management and the number of vendors that we have with the small team to kind of wrap every year, do the assessment and everything can become a little bit cumbersome. And because of that, there's a need that we are experiencing. And I, with my little bit of tinkering and my engineering degree, I have figured out some ways that we can use AI agents and bots, make something that's going to help monitor these activities of the changing. So that's something that's in my radar. And last but not the least, I'm also thinking about maybe using them for an observability space or piece all in general. But that's more like a long-term vision I have for the team. We do have our GRC monitoring and continuous monitoring tools. I'm waiting for them to also give me something. I haven't seen a lot of new features around AI bots or agents, more towards AI in general, generative AI with assessments and stuff. So yeah, these are some of the things. With policy tracker or change tracker is something that I'm really benefiting from today.
And now, Scott, I wanted to pivot to you and ask a slightly different question about how compliance officers can vet or, I guess, perform due diligence on AI tools. And you had mentioned this when we had a prep call earlier yesterday, listeners, where you had said that, there could be a difference between ChatGPT, Claude, I'm guessing Gemini and some of the other ones out there. But, you really need to understand, where is this AI coming from? What are the underpinnings of its LLMs, and how into the weeds should we be getting here? What would you tell compliance officers to think about as they're saying, hey, it's AI, isn't AI just AI? And I'm guessing no, it's not.
No, it definitely isn't. And the answer to what to think about is unfortunately everything. These training models, new versions are coming out at lightning speed. So any assessment of what they are or not will change. And Nick was describing how some of them are trained, and that is true for some, but not for others. I always think about AI as a tool. These are tools for tasks. I recommend starting with the task you want to do and figuring out, is machine learning, you're talking about data analysis, machine learning we've been using for years to identify outliers or group risks. You're trying to create, turn data into charts. Generative AI can do a pretty good job of that. Particularly the Claude model I like in terms of creating Excel and what have you. But each brand has got multiple versions. They keep coming out. Knowing that you need this for a business purpose and thinking of it as a tool, using the right model is geared to it. In terms of the models themselves, they all have strengths and weaknesses. They're different. I'm most familiar, honestly, with the two big ones, ChatGPT and Claude. Copilot is the one everyone's got because it's shipped with Microsoft. It's not one I'm a particularly huge fan of, but it's there and can be used. ChatGPT's training is more towards social awareness, interaction. It's why it's huge on the chatbot aspect. It's trained by appealing to humans, by how humans react to it. So we as humans like when people tell us we're right. And so it gets that positive feedback loop. Claude, little different model, more towards business, where ChatGPT, you'll give it something and it'll go out and come back with an answer. You then explain what it got wrong and go back and forth until you're happy. You run out of tokens for the day, or you get frustrated and decide to modify it or finish it or restart it yourself. Claude typically is more needy. It will come back, ask clarifying questions as you go through the process. Ask for check-ins. So for different things, for doing a chatbot, ChatGPT might be the right training model. But the important thing to think about is that most of what we're buying is typically not going to be the training model itself. It's going to be from a vendor with an overlay, whether that's done in-house or, again, from a vendor where they've laid over rules, conditions, data expectations. When you're talking about analyzing coding, for example, and whether or not the coding is right, you need to have that repository of what the coding guidance actually is. And how different insurance companies may deal with different things and what all the rules of your payers are. So you have to create this data source, this data lake, depending on how large it is, of your data, of your documents that you wanted to look at, and you constrain it and look at it that way. So it's really critical that we start with the task, we pick the tool to solve for that task, and then we look at all the ways it can go wrong.
All right.
And how it's being updated or not, because these are not static and the rules aren't static either.
So, Nick, give me some of your thoughts here, because I've been trying to keep an eye on the attendee chat. Clearly, a lot of attendees are using AI in a lot of different ways. Some of it seems more generative than agent, if I'm keeping an eye on all of the chats the right way.
Yeah.
But this, I don't know, I keep coming back to, this seems like this is going to be a technical challenge to understand what the risks of this powerful tool are. And that can be way outside of a compliance team's comfort zone or capabilities. That's my humble first take. But Nick, what do you think?
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's the thing that we have to overcome. You know what I mean? I mean, there's this new thing that we might be sort of from our personality wiring, or, we feel like it's kind of a third rail. And maybe it feels too technical, like we all don't have an engineering degree. So some of this stuff might seem, it seems like too hard to kind of get into, but you kind of have to get into it and at least understand some of it in order to apply the risk frameworks that you've accumulated throughout your career. Like you just kind of have to get over that hump and you have to jump in the pool, And listen, the pool's only cold for like a couple of seconds. You know what I mean? Once you jump in the pool, and you also can keep an AI up and ask it questions in real time as you're trying to like explore different things and get questions answered. So I think you have to kind of put on your explorer hat and you have to start kind of exploring this stuff, because you're naturally going to start to see the ways that this might go wrong inside your organization. You have to have conversations with how people are using it throughout your organization. So you can, again, put to work these tools that you've built, tools being your work history, the patterns that you've, the pattern recognition that you've accumulated, your risk perspectives. If we're not applying those, then there's some negligence on our side. And so we have to just jump in the pool and start trying to figure it out and try to understand it. As I've jumped in the pool, I think, I'm not a technical person by any means, but it's not as scary as kind of I thought, kind of on the front end. And I we keep doing webinars on topics like this because I think it's a big vulnerability for us in compliance if we don't embrace it and we have no dexterity with it. 3 to 5 years from now, I think there's going to be this sort of separation between those of us who right now are like trying to get smart on this stuff, trying to leverage it not only for our own job security or to like expand the impact of our organization, but like I said, these risks, like I hope it doesn't take a bunch of AWS type failures across all these different companies for us to finally say like, okay, I got to roll my sleeves up and jump in.
I will say, in fact, this is another question I'll put out to the attendees as well. Would you use something like, what is it, OpenClaw that lets you code up your own bots? Would anybody here actually vibe code their own compliance tools? I was at a compliance conference just last week where, of course, AI was all over the agenda, and they had some great AI speaker, thought leader, who talked about the capabilities of Claude and everybody else to code up apps now, where the man casually said, you will be able to code up your own GRC platform while you're at lunch. And I swear, 300 people in the room, I could visually see the thoughts above them, like, who on earth would do this? Who would take that sort of a risk on their own right now? And it was astonishing to me. And I have to admit, like, I don't know that I would do it, but it raises a question for me about, how can you get some sort of assessment of these third-party tools that are coming from a host of different vendors, or people are vibe coding them up themselves with various degrees of capability, of security, of governance. And that is another thing that I worry about a lot with agents, is that we need to understand where they're coming from. I'll maybe start with Andrew and then Scott and then Shruti and finally Nick. Like, what do you think about these risks and how we make sure that we don't have agent proliferation before they get out of control? Like, anybody can make them, then clearly they could come from any direction.
Yeah, I mean, hearing about that example, it scares me at first, but then it's like, well, resources are limited. If we could do it in a meaningful way, in a secure way, and save some financial dollars, then it's worth exploring. I don't know how soon I would do that, but because there's going to be an immense amount of work to monitor for it and see how it works. As far as like, how are we looking for different tools and resources in the healthcare space? There's not a lot of AI regulations out there, but there are a lot of other regulations that I've got to follow. And so those are things that I'm making sure my IT team knows about. Our security officer is involved in the discussion. So as we were going through that process of, which bot are we going to use? Are we going to jump into Claude or ChatGPT or stick with Copilot? Before we even turned that functionality on, we had to go in and do testing, and we had to ensure we were comfortable with the controls that we could put in place in our environment, as well as what was Microsoft telling us was going on behind the scenes, what was in that black box, and how do we pressure test that? So, those are things that, I'm partnering with those other enterprise functions on, but then I'm also talking to my operators. What are you seeing in the marketplace? You got, as a compliance officer, you've got to have a pulse on that front line and hear about at a town hall. Oh yeah, I was putting, I used ChatGPT on my phone to build out this presentation. Hey, we need to have a conversation about that, right? You need to use those examples to build your education and those other controls, but also take that as an input for how do you need to craft and monitor and create that governance for the AI tools that are coming in that your operators want to use, not just your compliance team.
That's right. And it's a great point.
Scott, what would you say about this? And the proliferation of agents, they could come from anywhere. You can make them yourself. You could, employees might bring them in. What are the risks that we need to think about, and what are the governance structures? To what extent do you? I was surprised by the number of attendees who said yes, they would be okay with trying to code up their own GRC platform. But what do you think, Scott?
I got two thoughts. One, I would not vibe code an agentic AI that's going into a live environment. AI, again, as business tools, are efficiency tools for experts. You can't replace expertise with an AI. You can't get rid of your compliance department and turn it over to AI bots. An expert in coding that uses vibe coding to get their rough draft start of their app or whatever they're doing, absolutely great. No problem. They can spot the issues. They've got enough experience to know what to tell it. Anyone else has a hobby project? Sure. Shadow IT for a business purpose? Not a chance. To the specific question about using one of these things to code up a GRC. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, when you think about software as a service, all of these things, GRCs, whatever, they're basically fancy UIs on top of a database. But it's the expertise that, pick your GRC company, could be Ethico, could be any of the other ones, brings that structures that UI, that addresses those use cases. Yeah. You've been around long enough, you've seen enough of them. Yes, we could design our own, but there's so much stuff behind the scenes and how the database links and how the report, all of that stuff, we're not going to know. So yeah, you might save money on the front end if you've got a very small, discrete thing. Someone I know actually did it. It was a great example, and I think Vicky mentioned something in the chat earlier about it. They used a chatbot. They created an agent to answer questions about their compliance policies. It wasn't the whole organization. It was just compliance policies. It was very limited. And they discovered that they had to rewrite all of their policies, turning back the last 20 years, going from incredibly technically detailed, because now we're talking, fifth grade language, getting everyone to understand, back into that detail level so the AI bot could answer accurately.
Yep.
Yes.
That expertise is not easy or cheap. And learning those lessons is not easy or cheap either.
And the maintenance.
It's worth it to hire experts. Yeah, it's worth it to hire experts to do it. Typically, and in most cases, especially as it get more complex.
Shruti, give me some of your thoughts here about this as well. It's an excellent point that Scott has raised, and I've heard it from others that, yeah, you can automate the policy management, but now you, compliance team, you're building policies for the AI to tell to the, like you've created a middle layer, but Shruti, what do you think about some of these issues here around how to figure out where these agents are coming from? When are they good? When are they not good? What would you say?
Yeah, so I'll start by piggybacking a little bit what Nick said earlier. First, I want to say, you do not have to be having an engineering degree or come from a technical background anymore to write your own code. And that's where I think agentic AI or even generative AI in general comes in so handy. Anybody can create anything. It gives us the ability to create anything from scratch. Yes, it is a bit uncomfortable at first, but so is anything else. I think as a compliance officer, I started looking at it. And my engineering degree was dormant for a long period of time because I was a practitioner in compliance for a long time. But I have slowly started to look at it in a different angle. These tools, I'm looking at it more as an enablers. They're making you think about things that you probably would have relied on someone else, like a third party or vendor, or probably wouldn't be thinking about in general. I think the design part is what, or at least this thought process is what a human is going to be in charge of. And then comes the AI supplement who is going to help you build and become more efficient. So I have a little bit of a polarizing view about that. I see agents being a more enabler. We have already added generative AI components within our environment. Of course, they're not going to replace my team. They can never replace the human counterparts, but they're definitely enabling them to think different way or add things or build things a different way that probably they wouldn't have. We are putting the guardrails. We are building a more, I think, an enhanced version of our TPRM because we're not building these agents, but procuring them. So our TPRM needs to support that procurement process. We need to get a good hold of our own data and governance to support those procurement. But we're highly, highly encouraging this change that we're seeing.
Nick, I don't know if you have any other thoughts here as well, but I'd be eager to hear them. I'm still stuck on the idea that, just because AI makes it really easy to reinvent a wheel as you vibe code your own app, like we're still reinventing a wheel. I wonder about how some of these agents, how would you explain them to a regulator if you have an incident and they're reviewing your compliance program? Oh, this is what I vibe coded. I don't know how a prosecutor would feel about that. Or how you would compare your experience with others because they vibe coded their thing. I vibe coded mine. You have two wheels, but they're different shapes different sizes. Like that doesn't necessarily help either. I'm still stuck that there's a lot of messiness under the idea that we can just vibe code our way to whatever we want.
Yeah. There's so much in this. We could have like a whole hour just on that particular question. Yes. There's a lot of, chatter on, X. Oh my gosh, I call it X. There's a lot of chatter on social about, all these cool things that people are vibe coding. And I think it can create this illusion that, yeah, cool, I'm on my way to lunch and I'm just going to rip out a full kind of GRC platform at some point. I read a study that said agentic code has 1.7 times more problems than human generated code. That's like almost 2 times. That's like pretty significant. And I think another headwind for, the average person, the average non-technical person, because I don't think most people on here have an engineering degree or even maybe know how to read code coherently, is that like you just don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what those edge cases are, kind of like what Scott was talking about. And if you imagine you come in and you say, cool, I built a brand new risk assessment tool for our entire organization that everybody is going to use. Like, who owns that? If something goes wrong, who does the maintenance on it? Who's the neck to choke? Like, who has the liability for something that goes wrong? So again, I'm trying to be objective in this because I have an incentive as a software provider to say like, yeah, we have a massive moat. And I think the moats are going to change depending on the business type and the software type. And I think, vibe coding, a workout app for yourself, that's probably fine. That's not a bunch of people relying on it. There's not like actual risk in that. But if it's something that's an enterprise-wide tool, I think there are, at least like today, I think we're a little bit further than like the posts that people are making on social saying like, look at this phenomenal thing I just built. I saw one the other day, I'm obviously a vendor. I'm trying to grow my business. And, I saw this post by somebody who like grew their social or grew their SEO by a ton because they ripped out all of these pages. Well, come to find out, the last time he tried it, his SEO sort of fell through the floor. So there's a lot of noise in the space right now. There's a lot of different incentives, competing incentives. People are going for views on posts. People are trying to sell their wares, so to speak. And there's that expertise gap where I'll speak for myself. I don't know what I don't know, and I would never put something out into the market that like I just kind of vibe coded in my basement. You know what I mean?
So to your point about who's going to be accountable for these things, I do want to touch on that as well while we still have time. And I want to maybe expand beyond just what compliance people are doing with agents in your own compliance function. You have the rest of the enterprise who is doing all sorts of stuff with AI. And ultimately, a human needs to be accountable for what the AI agent is doing. How do compliance officers have that conversation and get to a right answer when, for example, is it the IT team because it's technology, it's not doing what it's supposed to, so I guess it's the technology team's fault? Or if you are using an AI agent to boost marketing, should the VP of marketing be responsible? Because they can't code, they trust the tech team to say this is a good agent to use. So I'm still stuck on how do we identify who should be accountable for an AI agent that has done something bad? It needs to be somebody, but I don't know who.
Right.
Andrew, what do you think? And then Scott, and then Shruti. But like, how do we solve this problem?
I'm going to go to my favorite answer, and it depends, right? I think you have to.
We love that
and
answer.
I'm not a lawyer. I didn't have to spend a lot of money to figure that out. But I think as we're all navigating this environment right now, it's okay to acknowledge that you don't know all that. And so building structures in your company so that you have a control, whether it's an AI governance committee, or an executive sponsor or some leader where that accountability can either rest, or a group that has the discussion and says, okay, this is a new resource. What are the risks? How do they impact our business? How are they going to improve our business? And if something were to go wrong, who is going to be that accountable leader? And so it may be IT, depending on the company you're at. Maybe that's not the right place. Maybe it needs to be an operational leader. Maybe you've got a dyad functionality where it's a couple, depending, in the healthcare space, maybe you've got a co-owner that's on the clinical side and you've got an operational leader that's on the business side. But I think it's really important in your organization to have conversations at the executive level to understand how you're going to manage those risks, and ensure that, at the end of the day, if the government were to come, they're going to ask the board, what are they doing and how do they manage it? And ensuring you've got a response there that isn't just an AI policy that you don't follow, that somebody drafted using an AI bot, right? That it works for your company. So I think that's really important, is figuring out the answer to it depends and ensuring there is an answer. And then the monitoring piece, right? Like the company, whoever owns it now, as that resource evolves, or as that vendor starts to implement new resources and offerings, does it still make sense for that operational leader to be the point of contact or to be the risk owner? And so you've got to continuously evaluate, not just an approval, yep, we're good to use this internally, but keep going back and make sure you're monitoring to ensure that risk accountability is still consistent and the right one for your organization.
All right. Scott, what would you recommend people think through on this question? And then Shruti, I'll follow up with you after that.
I appreciate Andrew using "it depends" as a recovering lawyer, because that's true. But the bigger thing is that it's no different. Again, AIs are tools. They're not something different than we've had before in terms of how the law and liability and responsibility flows with it. It's when a system in an organization breaks down, it breaks down, and everybody in the organization will in some way or another be held accountable, all the way up to, and it's perhaps especially, senior leadership on the board. In terms of managing that risk, identifying it, and figuring out that governance structure, because again, it's IT. You want a coherent structure that includes IT and compliance and procurement and operations. Everyone's got to be at the table and figuring out what the task is, what's the right solution, what needs to be done, who's accountable, can it be automated, what are the risks, what controls are available to protect against those risks, can we document the process? If it's a human or an AI doing that task, can we hold them accountable for following that process? Auditing is not a one-time thing, especially with AI. You're looking for model drift. You're looking for, is the the actual results the same as the expected results? As it changes over time, why? Sometimes it's a black box and you won't be able to tell. We're getting more tools now that are opening up the window a little bit and giving you some explanation of the reasoning and creating some audit trails on what the sub-decisions were, the reasoning. I hate using that word because they're not reasoning. They're doing predictive, deterministic modeling based on what they've seen in the past in their training model and the data you're providing. But ultimately, we need to be able to track what's happening and whether or not it's good. Is bias creeped in? Are we getting out of? Is there a hallucination somewhere in the chain that threw everything off? And that goes back to one of these other things I made a note earlier. It's not all or nothing. When you set up an agentic AI, it doesn't have to go to sending out that email to you, Shruti's original example. You can have it set up draft emails. You can set it up to send preliminary emails with a follow-up or a loop. There are ways to build controls in. It's not all or nothing. You just don't turn everything over to an AI. Again, tools for efficiency by and overseen by experts. Expecting AI to replace everybody in a department, to replace the need for oversight. I mean, that we see litigation right now between the DoD and Anthropic on that very point. Is when, at what point, how high is the risk for your organization, for decision risk tolerance, that we're going to be okay letting this go with the guardrails we've put in place, but without a human pushing the button?
Shruti, give me some of your thoughts here. I especially like Scott's point that, you don't have to let the agent run all the way into the end zone. You can build these breakpoints, I guess, in the process to make sure it's still on track. That seems like a better way to keep human accountability to me. But how are you trying to think that through as you're using agents?
So I definitely agree with what Scott said. There definitely needs to be guardrails, but I want to start from your initial question. AI is a tool. Like Scott said, we have used multiple tools before. It's definitely not a scapegoat. You cannot fire an algorithm. But from the litigation point of view, our papers, our contracts, even our frameworks and compliance I would say methodologies. This is all currently based on human perspective and human in the center point. It's not adjusted to AI yet. We are looking at something which is doing things at a machine speed. That simply means the failures are going to be on a machine speed. We have a disciplinary process built out, which is going to keep our people accountable. People is the key word. It generally applies to 1 to 2 to 50 people. We're talking about machine failures. If you feed something wrong to agentic AI, it's going to repeat that same thing 1,000 times. So how is our contract going to take care of that? I still haven't figured out myself, but this just puzzles me when I think about it, because it's going to keep repeating that mistake until the cycle stops or we put some sort of guardrails in. The only thing I can think of from my point of view that we have put is coming back to Andrew's initial point. AI governance committee, a strong third-party risk management, something what we have already done through the cycle of digital transformations, security, privacy. We are treating it like a tool that we're implementing, a tool a little bit on steroid maybe, who is more vulnerable to, like, if they start making mistake, it can go to a quadruple sense. But definitely we need to put the guardrails, and we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right places. And if we build that, and if we build a good RACI, it could be the business owner or the sponsor of the project who would be all in all accountable. But yeah, there is a lot to think about, and I'm still very much trying to figure my way out of this too.
So we have a couple of great comments from the attendees I want to loop in. Somebody pointing out that if agentic AI goes wrong, what you need, first off, is some ability to make it stop. Have you built in a kill switch? Okay, now let's say you have, and it's been stopped. You can't stop the whole process just because you killed off the AI agent's use of it. So are you ready to swoop in with a manual process again, which is literally the plot of The Pit as I'm watching it right now, when they had to take down their automated patient tracking system and go back to pencil and paper. Nobody knew what to do. But
there were no pencil sharpeners,
it's a great show. You should watch it. But I mean, to that point, there is a lot of business continuity and disaster recovery process that you need to have waiting in the wings in case AI agents break down. Are we sure that we still have that? I don't know. But I mean, Nick, what are some of your thoughts here as you're listening to all of the ways that, we still need human accountability, but I don't know that we have the mechanisms to force that into what we're doing here yet.
I mean, it's probably going to be like everything else, right? We talked about this maybe last year on a similar session about AI, but when the first Model T came out, there weren't all of these sort of safety mechanisms in place. There weren't all these regulations. It took a bunch of car crashes for all this safety regulation to sort of be built into that technology. And unfortunately, it's going to be hard to anticipate what some of those, the true scope of this blast radius. So I'm kind of sitting here and I'm just thinking like, this is kind of a tale of two cities. 100 years from now, we're either going to be in like a Wall-E world where we're all 400 pounds riding around on floating, lazy boys, or it's going to be like Frank Herbert's Dune world, where there's no computers. They've all been outlawed because of, some of the ways that these things can go wrong. And we just have mentats doing all the, calculations. So I don't really have a good solution for it. I mean, it's moving so fast, it's going sort of parabolic. We've been doing webinars for years now together, Matt. And like when the AI was first kind of coming out, we were talking about kind of this phase, we're like in a couple of years, in a year or so from now, we're going to start to see this kind of stuff. And we're kind of at that point right now where it's going parabolic. The proliferation is going out kind of everywhere. And it's hard to keep up and anticipate what those risks are. Who owns the risk? Do we have, a kill switch to stop something? Can we anticipate all the, built-in potential hallucinations? And, have we sort of put enough guardrails around the agentic implications of, an agent running forward? I don't really have a good answer. I think the only answer is going to be sort of idiosyncratic, I think, for each business and each kind of compliance department or, each compliance team relative to how their business is leveraging this technology in the various departments within their organization, and at least some kind of cursory understanding of how these things work, what they can do, and where they can go wrong,
So we are almost out of time. I will give a easy wrap-up question for each of our three panelists, all of whom have been great. But in 60 seconds, give me your one bit of parting advice for every listener about how to make sure, what's the most important thing to be thinking about with using AI agents right now? And I'll start with Andrew and then Scott and then Shruti. What would you say? 60 seconds each.
But you said an easy question. I think the first thing is where are your risks? You've got to manage your risks and start there. And doing that means making sure your head isn't buried in the sand. So leaning in, getting involved, talking to your business partners, talking to operations, talking to your partners, your customers. What are they wanting to see? Trying to see where the strategy is going so that you're ensuring you've got the guardrails in place for your company and the risk profile for your company.
All right. Scott, what would you say?
Remember AI as a tool. Lean in heavily, as been talked about by all of us, into governance. But remember that our skills as compliance officers lean directly into that. If you look at all of the standard frameworks for AI governance, they can be boiled down to the 7 elements. It's identifying what's going on, being transparent, monitoring, educating, training, getting buy-in from it's the 7 elements. So do not be scared, even if you do not have a technical background, but be involved. Make sure you're thinking about identification of data, of risk, of controls, and keeping it transparent and documented, and following up to make sure what you expected to happen is still happening.
Phenomenal point.
And
you stole mine.
Shruti, Shruti, give us your parting words, and then Nick, I'll let you wrap it up.
The way I think about it is a change is coming, or I would say it's rather here. As compliance officer, we can either dread it or we can embrace it. But whatever we choose to do, we have to do it fast because this technology is changing at a rapid speed that any of us can keep up. An embrace, of course, each Andrew and Scott has explained how we can do it. I'm just going to repeat that. Risk assessment, knowing your environment, educating your employees. These are all very much valid points that we have to repeat. We have repeated that for security, for privacy, and now AI is just another layer. But the more we dread from AI, the more we are going to fall behind. Whatever we have to do, we have to jump in and we have to move forward.
All right.
She stole mine too. The water's fine. You got to jump in and move around. So let's get a massive emoji explosion for this phenomenal session. Great comments in the chat. Thank you guys all for sharing that. Next Tuesday, session number 2 for your MBA. So you don't want to miss that. Session 2 next Tuesday at noon Eastern. And then next Thursday, we have the annual benchmark report, which everybody absolutely loves. Come and see what those metrics are. Come and see how to improve your program. The time is now to drive that impact forward. Love you all. We're ending right on time. Round of applause for the Ethicsverse team. Thanks again, Matt, Kelly. You are the absolute man. You keep coming with hit after hit, man. Appreciate you. See you guys next week.
All right.